Every country on Earth today carries enormous debt, from superpowers with trillion-dollar economies to small developing nations barely staying afloat. Global debt has risen so high that it now exceeds $300 trillion, more than 3 times the entire world's economic output. But while the numbers appear frightening, the true mystery lies in a simple question. If every nation is borrowing, who exactly is lending? The answer is far more complex than pointing to a handful of foreign governments or financial institutions. In the modern system, countries owe money not to one single creditor, but to a vast interconnected web of banks, funds, pension systems, central banks, and even their own citizens. This global network of IOUs has become so dense that the world no longer owes money to someone else. It effectively owes it to itself. Yet the way that debt circulates means that the costs and benefits are not evenly shared. To understand how the world reached this point, we must travel back centuries to a time before credit cards, stock markets, or central banks existed, when national debt first emerged from a surprising source: war. In 1694, England was engaged in a costly conflict with France and found its treasury nearly empty. Instead of halting the war, the government approached wealthy merchants for help. In exchange for a guaranteed stream of interest payments financed by future taxes, those merchants agreed to lend money to the crown. To manage this new system, the Bank of England, the first modern central bank, was created. This was a revolutionary moment because it allowed a government to spend money it did not yet possess. Replacing the limitations of gold with the limitless potential of credit, France soon followed. The Dutch refined the model, and later the newly independent United States adopted it for funding its revolution and early expansion. Debt became not a sign of weakness, but a fundamental tool of state power. Nations no longer needed to conquer territory for gold. They could issue promises, tradable, interest-bearing promises, and build empires through finance rather than force. Today, that old system has evolved into the backbone of the global economy. Debt is no longer a temporary burden used during wartime. It is a permanent feature of modern governance. The United States owes tens of trillions of dollars. Japan owes even more relative to its GDP, and Europe's collective debt reaches into the double-digit trillions. But when politicians say a country is in debt, what they usually fail to mention is who actually holds these obligations. In the US, for example, the majority of government debt is held not by foreign powers but by American institutions: banks, pension funds, insurance companies, mutual funds, and the Federal Reserve. Foreign nations like Japan, China, the UK, and others hold a significant portion, but it is only a fraction of the total. In reality, the US government issues treasury bonds, domestic financial institutions buy them, and American taxpayers fund the interest payments, which flow right back into American retirement accounts and investment funds. The system appears enormous and overwhelming, but a large part of it is essentially one arm of the country owing another arm of the same country. This phenomenon is global. Japan buys US bonds. The US contributes to the IMF. Europe lends to developing nations through institutions like the World Bank. Those developing nations then hold foreign reserves, often parking them back into Western government bonds. It becomes a worldwide cycle of lending and borrowing where every country simultaneously acts as debtor and creditor. This structure resembles a circular financial ecosystem where money never stays in one place. It moves constantly, reinforcing the stability of the overall system as long as confidence remains intact. But the true force controlling this ecosystem is not the politicians who debate budgets or the citizens who pay taxes. It is the financial markets themselves. Massive players like hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, pension giants, and central banks indirectly determine which nations can borrow cheaply and which must pay high interest rates to survive. A country's economic fate can shift overnight if these market forces lose confidence in its ability to meet interest payments. Currency collapses, credit downgrades, government instability, and social upheaval often follow when the markets turn against a nation. This system has produced multiple crises that reveal its underlying fragility. When Greece's debt became unsustainable in 2010, bond markets panicked, interest rates skyrocketed, and the European Central Bank and IMF stepped in with rescue packages tied to harsh austerity measures. For ordinary Greek citizens, this meant tax hikes, pension reductions, wage cuts, and years of economic hardship. Argentina has defaulted numerous times. Sri Lanka's foreign reserves evaporated, leading to fuel shortages and political collapse, and other nations continue to suffer under the strain of debt repayment. When things fall apart, the creditors, often invisible in good times, suddenly become very visible, dictating terms that reshape entire societies. Yet after every collapse, the same cycle restarts. Old debts are restructured, new loans are issued, and the system continues its march forward. driven by the same logic that created it centuries ago. But here's the most surprising truth about the modern financial world. Government debt is not meant to be paid off. Not partially, not someday, not eventually. The goal is not repayment, but rolling over, issuing new debt to replace old debt indefinitely. Economists call this refinancing, and it is the core mechanism that keeps global capitalism functioning. For governments, paying off the national debt would actually be catastrophic because government bonds are the safest and most trusted assets in global finance. Banks use them as collateral. Pension funds rely on them for predictable returns. Central banks treat them as money itself. If a major nation like the United States suddenly attempted to eliminate all its debt, trillions of dollars of safe assets would vanish, financial markets would lose their foundation, and deflationary collapse would likely follow. The global monetary system depends on the existence of government debt. The system is built around it, not against it. This brings us to the deeper reality. Although nations owe money to themselves, the burden does not fall equally across society. Interest payments flow upward, from the general taxpayer base to the wealthy individuals and institutions who hold government bonds. Debt becomes a mechanism through which wealth concentrates. This is why rising global indebtedness and rising inequality often occur side by side. Those who own debt instruments, banks, funds, and wealthy investors gain consistent returns, while those who do not are the ones effectively paying for them. The system does not create villains and victims, it creates interdependence. But this interdependence is uneven, and its risks fall heaviest on those with the least influence over how the system works. The global financial order now runs not on gold or production, but on trust. Trust that governments will honor interest payments, trust that markets will remain stable, and trust that the system of perpetual refinancing will continue into the future. Debt today is not a temporary tool. It is the engine of economic life. But like any engine, it requires constant motion. If borrowing slows, if markets panic, or if confidence breaks, the entire structure can shake. And when that happens, the numbers on a balance sheet suddenly turn into real consequences for millions of people. Debt is not just a financial concept, it is a promise, a structure, a system of belief. And as long as that belief holds, the system can stretch far beyond what seems logically possible. But if the belief ever fades, we will remember something the modern world often forgets. Every debt is a claim on the future, and the future can only carry so much weight. If this gave you a new perspective on how our financial world really works, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to find them.